Mativa Mohamati Pralobham Vesham Vidaya Bahubhash Yata Aupadarmyam Deva Dvasham, of those who were envious of the devotees of the Lord. Nigama, the Vedas. Vartmani, on the path of. Nishtatanam, of the well-situated. Purbi, by rockets. Mayena, made by the great scientist Maya. Vihitabi, made by. Adrishya Turbi, unseen in the sky. Lokan, the different planets. Gamatam, of the killers. Mati Vimoham, bewilderment of the mind. Ati Pralobham, very attractive. Vesham, dress. Vidhaya, having done so. Bahubhashyate, will talk very much. Aupadarmyam, sub-religious principles. Translation. When the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha, and will preach on sub-religious principles. Purport. This incarnation of Lord Buddha is not the same Buddha incarnation we have in the present history of mankind. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Buddha incarnation mentioned in this verse appeared in a different Kali age. In the duration of life of one Manu, there are more than 72 Kali Yugas, and in one of them, the particular type of Buddha mentioned here would appear. Lord Buddha incarnates at a time when the people are most materialistic and preaches common sense religious principles. Such ahimsa is not a religious principle itself, but it is an important quality for persons who are actually religious. It is a common sense religion because one is advised to do no harm to any other animal or living being, because such harmful actions are equally harmful to he who does the harm. But before learning these principles of nonviolence, one has to learn two other principles, namely, to be humble and to be prideless. Unless one is humble and prideless, one cannot be harmless and nonviolent. And after being nonviolent, one has to learn tolerance and simplicity of living. One must offer respects to the great religious preachers and spiritual leaders, and also train the senses for controlled action, learning to be unattached to family and home, and enacting devotional service to the Lord, and so forth. At the ultimate stage, one has to accept the Lord and become his devotee. Otherwise, there is no religion. In religious principles, there must be God in the center. Otherwise, simple moral instructions are merely sub-religious principles, generally known as upadharma, or nearness to religious principles. Translation again. When the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha, and will preach on sub-religious principles. Om Gyanachimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This chapter is being spoken by Lord Brahma, presenting various avatars of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You may recall from the first canto where it is described that the Lord appears in all species of life. He can appear as a demigod, he can appear in animal species, he can appear resembling a human being, and we get the information from the Bhaktivedanta purports that there's an incarnation in every species of life for dealing with the particular time and circumstances of that species. So what does that mean for us in terms of recognizing avatars and glorifying them? We are only responsible for accepting and glorifying the avatars mentioned in the Shastra. Nevertheless, as the first canto states, you cannot count all the avatars of the Lord, just as you can't count all the waves in the ocean. So we're dealing with two inconceivable factors today. We have the unlimited incarnations of the Lord, of which we're meant to recognize those specifically delineated in the Shastra, and we're dealing with the unlimited waves of faults in Kali Yuga. So both these unlimited factors are very dominating, because the only way out of the ocean of faults of Kali Yuga is to take shelter of Namarupa, the incarnation of Krishna as the holy name. You may wonder, what about this statement? This incarnation of Lord Buddha is not the same Buddha incarnation we have in the present history of mankind. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Buddha incarnation mentioned in this verse appeared in a different Kali age. This is how technical the science of the avatars can get, as we were speaking yesterday about Vyasadeva. Bhagavatam is not time respectful as the Western mindset would like to have things. That doesn't mean Bhagavatam is all about just now coming. The Bhagavatam is about rasa, ecstasy, and that reality always takes precedence, even over chronology. And that's hard for the Western mindset to understand. We're so accustomed to step 1, step 2, step 3, and then in school you learn dates, famous dates for so-called pivotal moments in human history. We're very time-driven and time-bound. Therefore, we may wonder, well, why can't the Bhagavatam get it straight? I mean, okay, which Buddha is this? It's another day of Brahma or another Kali Yuga. Just like I was reading about Akrura and his arrival in Vrindavan. Now, in some accounts by acharyas, Akrura spends the whole night meditating on his upcoming journey to Vrindavan to bring Krishna and Balaram back to Mathura. In other versions by the acharyas, he goes to sleep and he gets up early in the morning, and without breaking fast, because it's Dwadasi, without breaking fast, he just took off in eagerness for Vrindavan. So then you find out that the acharyas say, well, you know, this pastime is Nitya Lila, it's eternal. And so there are details intermixed from different days of Brahma, because Krishna appears once every day of Brahma. The scope, the cosmological scope of Srimad Bhagavatam humbles us. It trains our mind to understand what is most important. In the Western world, it's dominated by the linear conception of time, because the Western mindset is very much bound up with Christianity, in which Christ appeared, and then things are supposed to develop until the end when Christ comes again. So it's a straight line from point A to point B. So this concept of progress affects the Western mindset very much. Things are always moving along, getting better, until they reach a certain point. What that point is, well, the second coming, or who knows, but things are always proceeding in a straight line, getting better and better. And what is the Vedic conception? Not linear, but cyclic. Cycles. What goes around, comes around. There's nothing new. Just like you get on a carousel. It just goes round and round. The little kids are fascinated by the carousel. You know, maybe some of you can remember going on a carousel as little kids. You get on a horse and the horse moves up and down as the carousel is spinning. So the kids are fascinated. They think this is really unique. This is really special. You went on a carousel? No, your parents didn't take you. The kids are fascinated. And the parents, of course, no, this is no big thing, but the parents are happy, the children are happy. So material existence, as the Shastra presents, is like that. It's a carousel going around. You'll come back to the point where you started, but the childlike residents of Kali Yuga are so fascinated by the horses going up and down as the carousel spins. When I was a little kid, my thing was bumper cars. What do you call them here? Huh? Dodgem cars. Yeah, oh, that was, I would just go again and again. Whatever little money I had, I would spend it on like 3 Dodgem car sessions in a row. I thought it was the greatest thing, you know? Driving and smashing into people. But the adults, the parents, no. They allow you, what, maybe 5 minutes or something like that, and that's it. But the kids are like, this is the greatest, this is the greatest. So in the cyclic material existence, where especially the Western mindset is fascinated by various items that the Vedic viewpoint considers inconsequential. And sometimes we may get discouraged taking the Vedic viewpoint in the wrong way. Why does it always stress birth, death, disease, and old age? That's not important. The important thing is, I did this awesome event yesterday. I had that awesome experiences. I have these goals. I want these achievements. I'm going to start a new relationship. That's what's important. And the Vedic presentation is, you've got 4 destroyers of happiness. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Birth, death, disease, and old age. They're not just biological markers. They are destroyers of happiness. And it takes quite some hearing for that truth to penetrate into our skull. So why take it as so important? Whether we're speaking about the Buddha in this Kali Yuga or the Buddha in another Kali Yuga, that's a technical detail. The most important thing is that the Bhagavatam is awarding you a taste of rasa, a taste of ecstasy. As we were speaking yesterday, Sanatana Goswami explains in his Krishna Lila Stava that every syllable of Bhagavatam is saturated with Krishna prema. So now you're going to look at this verse. Well, the atheists, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilated inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets. Where's the Krishna prema? Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Krishna, and everything in it is meant to arouse our dormant love of Krishna. That's Srimad Goswami's purpose. His purpose is not to stick to a rigid chronological order. Even in the 10th canto, in the presentation of Krishna's pastimes, chronologically some of them are out of order. Say, wait a minute, how can the Bhagavatam be free from fault and the error that is so common to human beings? And some of the pastimes are out of order. Sukadeva Goswami gets overwhelmed by ecstasy. You going to blame him for that? The Bhagavatam is a book of ecstasy. So let's consider Lord Buddha, even the Buddha as we know in this Kali Yuga. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a very interesting commentary, deflating the prestige that is usually awarded to Lord Buddha when comparing Buddha to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur knows Buddha is an incarnation of Godhead, but in effect, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying, let's hold it right there and let's put things into perspective. So he begins by explaining, Buddha means the awakened. So he says, tell me, how much awake can you be if your goal is simply to merge into matter or lose your spiritual identity? How awake is that? And then he points out that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has saved the world from considering that merging into impersonal Brahman is the ultimate. He saved the world from thinking the super soul is the ultimate. How can the super soul be the ultimate? The super soul has no spiritual pastimes. He saved the world from thinking that there's any worthwhile goal except developing your relationship with Krishna. This is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has done. So in other words, what has Buddha done? Then he brings up the point. Well, what about ahimsa, nonviolence? He said, in other words, small-time stuff compared to what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has done. You want to praise Buddha for compassion. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, I know he's an incarnation of Godhead, but let's just get the record straight here. You want to talk about compassion? All right, so Buddha stopped. He attempted to stop the violence done to the gross body and the subtle body. But he never talked about the violence done by our forgetting our spiritual identity in a spiritual relationship. By ignoring that, by obscuring that, this is violence. So, all right. In so many words, he says, all glories to the reduction of violence to the gross and subtle bodies. But most important is the reality of our relationship with Krishna. How is that going to be protected? By ignoring this point, this is violence. So in this way, he, for our own benefit, puts Buddha in his place. And then he says, I know he's an avatar. Don't get me wrong, in other words, I know he's an avatar. But who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Avatari, the source of all avatars. So, in other words, he's saying, just keep this perspective in mind. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Swayam Bhagavan. As I often explain, Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Swayam Bhagavan, the original personality of Godhead. So you may say, well, how can there be two originals? That is the inconceivable reality of Krishna and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Loosely speaking, we call Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the golden avatar, the most munificent, magnanimous avatar, and that, loose speaking, is acceptable. But the technical reality, and this technical reality is very important if you want to understand the innermost feelings of Krishna and the most confidential missions of Krishna, the technical reality is very consequential, very important. It's not like some Vedic detail of like, well, what kalpa are we talking about that Buddha appeared in? Or the description of Akrura the night before he went to Vrindavan. His activities are from, reports are coming from different days of Brahma. No, the reality of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so crucial, especially at the higher stages of spiritual advancement. So I like the way that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains this twin reality, because both Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have their realms in the topmost portion of the spiritual world. So the Acharya explains that when Krishna wants to experience love of himself in separation, he appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants to be the supreme enjoyer, he appears as Krishna. So they're double reality. That's why when you look on the cover that Prabhupada designed for the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the world, the lotus flower, you ever look at that? You see Goloka Vrindavan, and you also see Lord Chaitanya's abode. They both exist simultaneously. So with our Western mindset, we have the attitude, well, let's make up our mind here. It's either Krishna or it's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How can both be the original personality of Godhead? How can both have their abodes? And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes, how can some devotees in their perfect existence join Krishna Leela in that part of Goloka Vrindavan, and then some devotees go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's portion of Krishna Loka, and then some devotees are in both places. What's going on here? We're so used to it's either this or it's that. So in this way, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out the relative merits of Buddha compared to the absolute merits of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If you want to just say it's even Steven, they're both avatars. Remember, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not really an avatar. He's the source of all avatars. As Lochanadas Thakur writes in his song, Sabha avatar sar shiromani kevala anandakanda. He's the essence. Gauranga is the essence of all incarnations. And he teaches Kevala Anandakanda, the path of pure bliss. Therefore, Bhaja Bhaja Bhai, Chaitanya Nitai. Just worship those two brothers, Chaitanya and Nityananda. Destroying the world is nothing new, as you see in this verse. The atheists, with brilliant scientific knowledge given by the greatest scientist, Maya. In other words, the scientist known as Maya is far more brilliant than any puny scientists of today. And so under the direction of Maya, the atheists have constructed rockets that they can fly unseen in the sky and annihilate inhabitants of different planets. This is nothing new. The same thing is going on today. So much military weaponry, all for the purpose of destroying people. Because the concept of war being fought between armies is so old-fashioned. The horrible truth of today is that the quickest way to win a war is not to engage your army against another army. The quickest way to win a war is to annihilate the population, and then the people say, anything, we just want to live. So in this way, war has become more and more barbaric. The citizens are held hostage. If you can terrorize the citizens, they'll demand that their government surrenders. They just want to live. They're tired of suffering. So why go through a long, costly battle between opposing air forces, opposing armies, when all you do is massacre the citizens, and the citizens will demand their government surrenders? That's what's going on today. Therefore, just as Arjuna feared in Bhagavad Gita, he told Krishna, if I fight this battle of Kurukshetra, because so many male warriors will die, the family structure will be destroyed. There won't be husbands for women. The children will not be properly raised. There'll be social havoc. And you see in the first canto, after the battle of Kurukshetra, when Yudhisthira is balking, he's hesitating. I don't want to take the throne. Look at all the havoc that's been done just to make me king. All this slaughter just so I can be king. I've become the enemy of so many women and children. I've destroyed their lives. Now, there's no question of any, in the battle of Kurukshetra, women and children being killed. But Yudhisthira is taking it in that way, that because their husbands are dead, I've destroyed the women and the children. So, and as Prabhupada points out, from one point of view, you could say that Arjuna's predictions were correct. It's just that Krishna had a higher plan in order. And that's hard for us to understand, because our number one priority is body preservation. That's the religion. But Krishna told Arjuna, I've got something else in mind. The bodies are doomed anyway. If you don't fight and kill them, they're not coming back anyway from the battlefield. So you might as well fight and take the credit. Just be an instrument. So Yudhisthira was feeling that what Arjuna predicted was what actually happened. But no, there was no destruction of women and children. But Yudhisthira was looking at the consequences of the male population of warriors being wiped out and taking it upon himself that how can I be king when all this social havoc has happened because of me? But warfare today, who primarily suffers? Women and children. You terrorize the population, and in that way, especially the women and children, they're obliterated, and they demand, we can't go on like this. In World War II, most of the casualties are civilians, not military people. So this is the way a civilization of demons proceeds. The huge expenditure on military. We don't consider that a symptom of human life, and we actually consider it to be demoniac. The last time I checked, a couple of years ago, the USA spends more on its military than the next 7 nations combined. To protect what? To protect which mall you can shop at, who owns the mall? Is it going to be the Chinese, or is it going to be People are economic slaves anyway. So you're going to have a huge destructive war just to establish who owns the malls, who already owns all the malls. So in this way, you don't have an actual human civilization. It sounds astounding. How can one country spend more on the military than the next 7 nations combined? And those next 7 nations combined include China and Russia. One of the former president of the USA, Obama, was making a sarcastic remark, and his political opponents took it as serious, and they were happy. He said, "I don't think we have to worry about the security of the USA when we do spend more on the military than the next 7 nations combined." So the opposing politicians said, "He's seen the light." Okay, that's the absolute truth. He was actually saying it sarcastically, but now Australia wants to join the party, have a fleet of nuclear submarines. One nuclear submarine carries enough devastation equivalent to 2,000 times what destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just one submarine, 2,000 times the havoc. This is demoniac. Unless we hear what is real human civilization, we won't know. We'll just take it as normal. Yeah, there's military, there's armies, there's this, there's that, which you all are paying for, the taxpayer is paying for. Unless we know what the real standard of human civilization is, by hearing Bhagavatam, we'll just accept all this. This is why Bhagavatam, just hearing Bhagavatam, is so revolutionary. It reworks your circuits. It rewires your brain. It starts to change your priorities if you hear it regularly. And this is why a most important part of our bhakti lifestyle is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, especially in the association of devotees. That's part of the process, the coming together to hear. In this way you get fresher and newer realizations because of hearing in the association of devotees. As Lord Kapiladeva explains, Satam Prasangam Mamavirya Sambhado, the talks about Krishna take on a special power or reveal a special power in the association of devotees. Not only a special power, but a special flavor. So sometimes we forget that just by attending Bhagavatam class, we're putting ourselves in the position for making spiritual progress, especially through tasting what is spiritual flavor. And we've already talked about how rasa, the imparting of spiritual flavor, is the real purpose of Bhagavatam. More so than chronological order or satisfying the Western craving for chronology and cause and effect, step 1, step 2, step 3, like a recipe. The Bhagavatam has a different priority. We read in the purport that before learning ahimsa, before learning these principles of nonviolence, one has to learn 2 other principles, namely to be humble and to be prideless. Unless one is humble and prideless, one cannot be harmless and nonviolent. That's something to really think about deeply. Most important, before nonviolence, is humility and pridelessness. Otherwise, sooner or later, your lack of humility and your pride is going to result in some violence. Just consider, for example, since I'm reading about Akrura, Kamsa had been put on red alert by Narada Muni, and Kamsa was raging. He thought, I've been cheated by Vasudev. Narada Muni spilled the beans completely, because Narada Muni wants to accelerate the pastimes, which means accelerate Kamsa's death. Kamsa's trusting. It's Narada Muni. He's telling me this is the reality. I'll take action immediately. Where's Vasudeva? I'm going to kill Vasudeva for his being duplicitous. And Narada Muni skillfully says, wait a minute. Vasudeva is not the problem. Your real problem is Krishna and Balaram. So this way, Narada Muni points Kamsa in the right direction. If you imprison or kill Vasudeva, those two boys might flee out of fear. So better you first focus on getting those two boys to mature and dispatching them, killing them, and then later you can deal with Vasudeva. So this is Kamsa says, oh yeah, makes sense. So the morning before Akrura arrives in Vrindavan, Keshi, the demon Keshi, has been killed. In the afternoon of that same day, before Akrura arrives in Vrindavan, Vyomasura has been killed. And then in the evening, Akrura arrives in Vrindavan. Why was he sent? It was a brilliant idea of Kamsa. He was looking for the most trusted and prestigious elder in the Yadu dynasty that he could find to accomplish the task of bringing Krishna and Balaram to Mathura. So that's why he selected Akrura. Not because Akrura was his man. Akrura wasn't a Kamsa man, but Kamsa wanted to take advantage. He's known, he's got respectability amongst the Yadus. He's got believability. He's got street creds. So I'll choose Akrura. And Akrura came before him, and Kamsa really buttered him up. Oh, there's no one more appropriate than you. I'm taking shelter of you just like Indra took shelter of Vishnu. Now Kamsa hates Vishnu. And by his saying that, the acharyas point out, he's actually denigrating Vishnu. The real important person is Indra here in this example I'm giving. Vishnu. Anyway, Indra takes shelter of Vishnu. We all know Indra is the main one. This Vishnu, we have to kill him one way or the other. So, Akrura, I'm taking shelter of you just like Indra has taken shelter of Vishnu. There is no one more respectable than you for accomplishing this task I have in mind. Here is a brand new chariot. I want you to take this brand new chariot, consider it a Mercedes chariot, because that was all part of Kamsa's thinking. He's so proud of his intelligence. You take this brand new chariot and you bring back Krishna and Balaram to Mathura. I've got plans. The elephant Kuvalayapid will deal with them. If somehow, by some remote possibility, they get past Kuvalayapid, I've got the wrestlers, the two wrestlers, Chanura and Mushtika. They'll finish the two brothers, without a doubt. So I want you to take this chariot. It's brand new. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out Kamsa's mentality. You're an innocent Vaishnava, Akrura. That's what Kamsa's thinking. He doesn't say it. But I can blow your mind with material opulence. When you see this chariot, you're going to want to drive it. Kamsa's really calculating like that. Not only will you want to drive it, but also when the boys, Krishna and Balaram and Vrindavan, see this Mercedes flash chariot rolling up, they're going to want to get on it. He's thinking everyone's a materialist like him. Now what's Akrura thinking? Akrura is thinking, I'm glad you're giving me a brand new flash chariot to to take to Vrindavan to pick up Krishna and Balaram, because I wouldn't want to bring them back on a chariot that you sat on before, you demon. He doesn't say that also. So Kamsa presents his master plan. So proud. And it was a very good plan, as we'll hear from Akrura himself. After Krishna and Balaram are dead, then I'll deal with Nanda and the cowherd boys. I'll figure out something for harassing them. Vasudeva will be killed. My father Ugrasen and my father's brother, I'll finish them off because I think they want the kingdom back from me. He had all these schemes, and certainly I'll be victorious because I got friends. I've got Jarasandha. I've got Shalva. He named a whole list of demons. They'll all be with me. And then he gives the final consummate materialistic assurance to himself. Once my plans are finished, once they're executed, it'll be very wonderful to rule the whole world without obstruction. If you want to feel that material contamination rising up in us, it'll be very wonderful to rule the world, the whole world, without anyone interfering with my plans. Whether it's in my home or in my neighborhood or in my nation, it'll be very pleasant to rule the whole world without any interference. This is pride. Sometimes the pride manifests in a big way, sometimes in a small way, but it's still pride, and it still gets us in trouble in terms of repeating birth and death. So Akrura hears all this. The plans for dealing with Krishna and Balaram, the plans for dealing with Nanda and the cowherd men, the plans for dealing with Vasudeva, the plans for dealing with Ugrasen and Ugrasen's brother. And what does Akrura say? You know, your plans are truly excellent. They're well crafted. Let me just point out that there's such a thing as destiny. And although we have plans, happiness and distress comes of its own accord through destiny, but I shall do what you say. And what's Akrura thinking? I've got a chance to see Krishna and Balaram. So Akrura is taking advantage of Kamsa's pride and arrogance for his own purposes. And then, on the way to Vrindavan, you see humility. In Kamsa, you see the extraordinary pride. In Akrura, you see the extraordinary humility. How do I deserve such an opportunity to see Krishna and Balaram? Just like ordinary persons aren't supposed to touch the Vedas, someone like me is not supposed to have this opportunity. But he said it could happen sometimes, just like a blade of grass floating on the waves of the ocean is sometimes carried to the shore. Similarly, the conditioned soul, lost in the waves of time, is sometimes carried to the shore and gets an opportunity like I have now. So he expresses such humility that I don't deserve this. And he has a little worry. I'm being sent by Kamsa. Will Krishna recognize that? I don't have the motivations that Kamsa has. I'm just taking advantage of the opportunity to see Krishna, to do some service. Because I know that Krishna needs to come to Mathura. Akrura is in Dasya Prem. His relationship with Krishna is in servitude. And that servitude, rasa, starts to get ecstatic when he begins to think how I'll be greeted by Krishna. What's going to happen when I get to Vrindavan? He speaks about 20 verses of preliminary realizations, prayers. He even mentions the gopis, which is not a conflict with his Dasya Prem, because the acharyas point out, he just mentions about the gopis and their relationships with Krishna. He mentions that in a very subordinate way, an aside. So, after his 20 verses of glorifying Krishna, humbly presenting his own situation, how did I get this greatest fortune? Something that Brahma doesn't get, Shiva doesn't get, something that Lakshmi Devi doesn't get. Here, I've got it. And then he begins to rehearse in his mind what's going to happen when he encounters Krishna and Balaram. First thing I'll do is fall off the chariot at their feet. The second thing I'll do, he starts increasing in intensity. After falling on the ground at their feet, I'll touch the feet. And then Krishna will put his hand on my head. And then Krishna will embrace me. He's just escalating. You would normally think that Dasya Prem, love of Krishna and servitude, is kind of very sedate and official. But no, Akrura is shooting to the most ecstatic expression of Dasya Prem, love of Krishna and servitude. And of course, when he arrives in Vrindavan, he sees the footprints of Krishna. And he jumps off the chariot and rolls in the footprints, because as you've read in Nectar of Devotion, the footprints of Krishna are a stimulant for ecstatic love. So Akrura shows you that. As soon as he sees the footprints, he jumps down and rolls in them. And that rolling in the dust of the footprints is an expression of his ecstatic love. It's also listed in Nectar of Devotion, rolling on the ground in ecstasy. So all this is going on. Akrura is entitled to all that because of his humility and pridelessness. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada points out in Krishna book that Akrura is showing you the proper example for entering into the holy Dham. His humble and prideless attitude, his anticipation. His anticipation is very important in ecstatic love of Krishna. It's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. When we meet, it will be like this, it will be like that. And Kamsa, as we pointed out, is the perfect example of arrogance. He had it all figured out. He thought, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll arrange for this, I'll arrange for that. And it was an excellent plan. But just like in the Battle of Kurukshetra in Bhagavad Gita, Duryodhana's side was materially more powerful. Simply there was a problem with the Krishna factor on the side of Arjuna. So let us bear in mind how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur put whatever Buddha you're talking about put him in the proper perspective as compared to the most magnanimous, the most non-violent personality, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the source of all avatars. Any questions? Yes. You have to come up so they can hear you in here.
I was just wondering, who is such an amazing devotee?
Such a gentleman in a transcendental sense.
Is it explained somewhere by the Acharyas what exactly happened in Kamsa's association that he had to later join the conspiracy and become part of it?
This is Leela. He was actually, yes, they do point out, he was doing it as a service. He wanted the jewel for Krishna. But things got intricate. Sometimes we make a plan to serve Krishna and then there's some intricacies that we weren't expecting happen. Of course, this is all Leela. Some say the gopis cursed him. In any case, it's all for Krishna's pleasure. Anything else? Yes.
How are you talking about hearing in association with devotees? I don't know how to say this, but even if we're very nearby, it seems like Prabhupada's given us a taste of ecstasy, even though we're very nearby, and if we come to Bhagavatam and we hear these things you're talking about, it is moving. So, is that, would you say that that's in some way pride or imagination, because it feels real to be moved?
Well, even if someone considers themselves a neophyte, still the taste of bhakti is there. Because we're followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, pre-packaged into all levels of bhakti is some taste. Of course, as we advance, and hopefully we'll do that, the taste increases. But even, and this is pointed out in one purport in Bhagavatam, even the neophyte is tasting something that's real. Just consider what Prabhupada has given us. Before Bhagavatam class, we're chanting Jai Radha Madhava, a very intimate song. After Mangalarti, we're singing Tulsi Puja. I just want to be a maidservant to the cowherd damsels of Braja. Topmost confidential. So, I could quote Prabhupada himself in Los Angeles during the famous Gopi Baba Club incident. And he was telling certain devotees who were focusing only on the Gopi sections of Krishna book and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and not only focusing on that, but thinking any other sections dealing with Mother Yasoda even, that they were inferior. So Prabhupada was very angry, and he said, "You're misreading my books." There was no question back then of reading other books outside of Prabhupada's books. That wasn't the issue. Here, Prabhupada is accusing them of misreading his own books. And he explained. He said, "My books are like a chemist. They contain prescriptions for every level of devotee, from the most neophyte to the most advanced. So it's all there. But you have jumped to a section and you're focusing exclusively on a section that's beyond you." So here we have an example of Prabhupada chastising persons for misreading his books, not other books. Then there was another case of one of the Sanskrit editors. Wrote a Goswami in Vrindavan, one of the Jati Gosai, caste Goswamis. I would like some of your translations of Goswami literature, and I can pay you by sending you some of Prabhupada's books. In other words, his mentality, the Sanskritist mentality, was, I'll trade in these lesser books for the more esoteric texts. So he's using Prabhupada's books as some kind of trading trinkets. Oh, Prabhupada was furious when he found out. I saw the letter. He demanded a full investigation. He demanded that either the caste Goswami in Vrindavan sends the books back or pays for them. So you might say, what's the fuss? What's the big deal? But Prabhupada knew the mentality. And this Sanskritist maybe lasted a couple of more months, then he disappeared. The Sanskritist was thinking, okay, we've got the ordinary books, and now I'll trade them in for some esoteric stuff. I remember Jayadvaita Brahmachari then, taking up Prabhupada's mood. He was like, here we have Prabhupada Goswami writing night and day his books, and this Sanskritist is thinking he'll trade in Prabhupada's books for some so-called Goswami literature. I always remember that. Our Devamrita Swami can be very eloquent. What about Prabhupada Goswami? Anything else? Yes.
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. It was talking about Krishna's pastime. It says when he killed the demons, then they also get liberation. Just like Govardhana, she got the position as a nursemaid.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they get liberation, it's a distant. Swami was mentioning that it's a distant relationship in the spiritual world, and one devotee mentioned doesn't matter even if I get a very distant relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world, at least I'll be in the spiritual world. So what should be our proper mood?
Our proper mood is wherever Krishna wants to send us to serve him, we accept. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Mama Janmani Janmani Shrede Bhavatad Bhakti Hoitaki Tvai. I don't even mind birth after birth as long as I have a chance for devotional service. In discussing that verse once, Srila Prabhupada said that, and this is very difficult to understand. And this is the highest rasika level. When sometimes devotees talk about who's a rasika, this personality's a rasika, that one personality's a rasika. This one talks about Radha and Krishna all the time, that one doesn't. Prabhupada just gave us the ABCs. Prabhupada walked his talk. He said things that you'll only find Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Bhakti Vinod Thakur saying. Prabhupada's contemporaries didn't speak like that. Things like, the desire to go to Vaikuntha is a contaminated desire. Whew. That is very deep. A real devotee just goes where Krishna wants him to go. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says what he says. So we're not going to go around condemning persons who want to go to Vaikuntha, by the way. But Prabhupada is showing you the topmost echelon of bhakti. He's speaking as a rasika. But we're so foolish because he's not telling intimate pastimes of Radharani. We think, oh, he's just given the ABCs. You look at the fourth canto, the prayers by the Prachetas, and there's this purport where Prabhupada writes that a real devotee considers himself too contaminated to go back to Godhead. A real devotee just wants to engage in Krishna's service. This is top drawer stuff. I just want to be Krishna's pure servant. While having that, now here's the trick, so to speak. While having that attitude, whatever Krishna wants of you develops. That's the secret. By having that attitude of, let me serve Krishna how Krishna wants me to serve, you're already back to Godhead. That's what Prabhupada was explaining when he said the desire to go to Vaikuntha is contaminated. Because if you just want to serve Krishna in the best way, you're already back to Godhead. You're already in Vaikuntha. That was his vision. Like when he came to Melbourne in '76 and said, if everything in the temple is for Krishna's pleasure, then this is not Melbourne, this is Vaikuntha. Then this is Goloka Vrindavan. And all the devotees are roaring, Jai! This is topmost Rasika stuff, but we're so silly. We think he's not talking about, intimate Radha Leela, so maybe he's just giving us the ABCs. All right, I vented enough. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.